Blog Talk Radio.
We are the UR Tennis Network. Our mission is to be the voice of tennis. We enlist a team of passionate enthusiasts to promote our sport. We strive to bring interesting perspectives on the many spins of tennis. Our goal is to provide the learners of our sport with current news and information from many angles. We seek active participation from communities interested in tennis, but tennis is not interested in them. We are expanding our outreach. Tennis is a true lifetime sport that needs to be talked about, and the UR Tennis Network pledges to pursue this idea relentlessly.
Good morning and welcome to the Parenting Aces radio show on Blog Talk Radio's UR Tennis Network. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and today we are going to be talking with Dave Fish, who is the head men's coach at Harvard University, and he's going to be discussing with us universal tennis ratings. Those of you who have followed me and followed my son's recruiting experience a little bit on the blog and on Facebook may be familiar with universal tennis ratings. I have written about it. I actually had Dave Howell, who is one of the creators of UTR, on the show a while back, and I hope you had a chance to go back and listen to that podcast. And so I'm looking really forward to having Dave Fish on today, because not only has Dave been instrumental in kind of getting the word out about universal tennis ratings, but he can also discuss it from the college coaching side and the recruiting side, since, as I mentioned, he is the head coach at Harvard. So I'm looking very forward to picking his brain today and hearing what he has to say. Just to give you a little info, Dave did actually play at Harvard as a college player, and just this past weekend he was awarded an award by the ITA at their coaches convention down in Florida, and so we'll talk a little bit about that too. I'm really looking forward to having him on. But before I bring Dave on the line, I wanted to play a quick commercial. When we come back, Dave Fish discussing universal tennis ratings.
Warning. Orthopedic surgeons are seeing an increase in overuse injuries when young athletes perform the same repetitive stressful motions over and over. Pitching, tennis, weight training, even long swimming workouts can cause overuse trauma that may require surgery. If your kids play and train hard, visit orthoinfo.org or stopsportsinjuries.org. A message from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons and the American Orthopedic Society for Sports Medicine.
Welcome back to the Parenting Aces radio show on Blog Talk Radio's UR Tennis Network. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and as I mentioned before the break, we have with us today Dave Fish of Harvard University, and Dave is going to be talking with us about universal tennis ratings. Dave, are you on the line?
I am, Lisa. I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I know you are a busy guy, and you just got back from the ITA Coaches Convention, I'm assuming, and hopefully some beautiful weather down in Florida.
It was lovely.
So tell me about your honor that you received while you were there, because I just think it's awesome that you were honored in the midst of your peers by the ITA, by the governing body for college coaches.
Well, Lisa, I hope we don't spend a lot of time on this, but thank you for asking. It was a lovely honor. And many coaches take a look at the ITA and say, wow, this is really a very special part of American tennis. And so those of us who got involved and were able to have good careers in it have just done our very best to make sure that we keep it going for the next generation. College tennis will be, like a lot of non-revenue sports, is potentially under a lot of risk right now. And so they were kind enough to honor me with a new Meritorious Service Award given by Doug Conant and the Conant Leadership Foundation. And so I was kind of happy to, I don't know whether deserving or not, but I was kind of happy to accept it, and it gave me a nice chance to say thank you to all my coaching peers who've been such wonderful colleagues for so long. And so I appreciate it, and I hope it puts a better spotlight on college tennis in general, because it's very special.
I agree, and I know it was well-deserved, and congratulations to you for being recognized for all your hard work on behalf of all the rest of us who value college tennis, and our kids who hopefully are going to have, phenomenal experiences in their own college tennis careers. So thank you for your service. So
thank you.
Before we jump into kind of the depth of universal tennis ratings, I was hoping maybe you could give my listeners just kind of a down and dirty summary of what universal tennis ratings is, how it differs from other rankings and ratings out there such as USTA or Tennis Recruiting, and then let's kind of get into the meat of it.
Sure. Well, Lisa, what's most interesting about it is that the simplest way to explain it is that in a system like the French system, they produce 12 times more competitive players per capita than we do here in the United States. And their system is based on what we would call level-based play, putting players of similar abilities rather than categorizing them by their age or their place in school, just simply by saying it in the same way that we would say in public school, if you put someone in calculus with another person who's still working on subtraction and addition, they're not going to have a very happy experience. Similarly with tennis players, unlike golf, where you can play the course and it really doesn't matter, you can have a handicap that makes it good for betting. But in tennis, if you're not playing against someone of comparable abilities, you're probably not maturing quite as fast as you can. And we have a system, and it's nobody's fault, but we have a system where our kids play a lot of lopsided matches. And so the better kids beat up on the weaker kids, and the weaker kids kind of get demoralized, and the better kids get a little bored. And it's a little like feeding them junk food over and over again. They don't grow to their full potential. Whereas in Europe, say France, for instance, where the kids are getting a steadier diet of more competitive matches more frequently, they mature faster. They learn more about differences in game style. And so some years ago when I learned about this and realized that college tennis itself was becoming more stratified, we were having almost no play between Division I or Division II or Division III school, whereas 20, 30 years ago, Foothills Junior College in the California Bay Area used to compete regularly against Cal Berkeley and sometimes beat them. And so inadvertently over the course of many years, we put up many barriers and have caused our juniors and our college players and our aspiring pros to have to jump through more hoops in order to succeed. And that the rationale for having a common language of ability, the time was now for that. So I got involved and found out about this fantastic system, but it was really like a tree falling in the woods. If nobody knew about it, it didn't matter how good it was. And so I tried to simply tell the story, and it turns out that it seems to have something that helps every part of American tennis.
Well, I know that the NorCal section, Northern California, has gone to level-based play for a lot of junior events now, and they're having great success with that. They're getting a lot of positive feedback, and I'm wondering if you're seeing it spread from there. If you see this as kind of the wave of the future for junior competition.
Yeah, I really think it's an idea whose time has come through the courage of Amy Jensen, who was their competition coordinator out there. She heard about these ideas several years ago, and she had the courage to go out and say, hey, this makes so much sense, why don't we try it? And so they have continued to experiment. Now the players and the coaches and the administrators all find, wow, this makes sense. People are having a happier experience. So I think at all levels in our society today, we're seeing more things that put more tools in the hands of the consumer and actually say, we can help give you a better experience overall. If we create more level-based play opportunities, we make it possible to reduce the travel costs in tennis. I'll give you a quick illustration. In NorCal, they found that 87% of the USTA NorCal members lived in the Bay Area. And only 22% of the tournaments were in the Bay Area. So functionally, if you kept up that system, it means that you had 80% of the kids traveling, probably spending more time in the car than they are playing in order to succeed in our age-based paradigm. So obvious inefficiencies like that, which if you can give a kid more time to stay in school, more time to practice, and you give them more opportunities to play locally against their level, and including that playing against their level, including playing against older, stronger, smarter players, such as they would find in college or would find people who graduated from college, then you're giving kids a better diet, cheaper, you're increasing the accessibility of tennis, you're increasing the affordability of it, you're making it more sustainable, and at every level, the economics of it work better. So they've been very happy with it, and now we found that USTA Midwest just voted to begin using Universal. USTA Southwest has done the same, and we're engaged in conversations with several other sections. So as you noted, I think this is a grassroots movement, and the beauty of it is that in these days of kind of these social media blowback, if we were to set out to create a national system, this is probably the best way for it to spread. Instead of it coming down as a national mandate, this is what everybody has to do. Everybody has the kind of fun of saying, let's look at how we might use this tool in our local area and see if we can use it to make things better instead of forcing it on people. And that's been my experience, is it has spread not because Dave Fish has told the story well, but because people have the fun of saying to their friends, hey, check this out. It's pretty neat. And I've had that experience with American juniors, American coaches, people from other countries. And so at every level it seems to reduce the unnecessary hurdles and barriers that we have erected in things like aging up. You as a parent know how much it costs to go from the 12s to the 14s, about 6 months ahead of the time that the kids age up. They have to start doubling up. And you're paying more expenses, you're chasing points. Points per round as a system is a very logical system. It's very easy to understand. It's very easy to administer. And that's why it's become pretty much the gold standard around the world, not just in the United States, but everywhere. The only problem is it measures the wrong things. And so it ends up yielding inaccurate seedings in many cases, inaccurate opportunities where it favors those who can afford to go and chase points. And so in many ways, while it's easy to administer, it's not giving our kids the rich enough diet that they need to remain in the sport, not get burned out, and to remain really enthusiastic and keen moving ahead and hopefully getting to play in college and beyond.
Very true, very true. So for those of you listening, if you'd like to call in, if you have experience using Universal Tennis Ratings, your child's played in a tournament, and you want to share that with us, or you have a question for Dave, our number is 714-583-6853. Again, 714-583-6853. Dave, before we went on the air, I mentioned to you that I saw this morning that the Lawn Tennis Association, which is Great Britain's version of USTA, has just adopted for 2015 a new ranking/rating system that it feels very similar to Universal Tennis Ratings, and they are going to be looking at play across all age groups across all levels, local tournaments, international tournaments, etc. And they're basically going to publish two lists, a list for boys and a list for girls, and that's it. And so this concept of integrating more information seems to be catching on, as you mentioned, not just here in the U.S., but around the world.
Yes. Well, you're absolutely right, Lisa. And I think the strength of these ideas, people end up looking at them through their lens, and and I think it's great that the LTA is doing that, because we've been in touch with a number of recruiting services that tell us about LTA kids, and they really haven't trusted the rating system over there. So I think it's a great move if the LTA is finding a way to give people ratings, a metric for understanding their level more accurately, because that will probably result in more play, as it does here and in France and in other countries. And so my hat's off to them for doing that. What I began to see as I worked with the concept of universal tennis, I think a universal is really like an iceberg, where 90% of the iceberg is beneath the water and you can't see it. Is that the rating system itself is a lovely conversation piece. Kids get to know where they belong. But the 90% below the surface is what it does to inspire and invigorate tennis, both at a national level, at a sectional level, at a local level. And we also know that tennis is international these days. Is that the reason that college tennis is as great as it is because we have top international players coming here to make it better. Our former player, James Blake, would never have been as ready for the Pro Tour as he was had he not been able to cut his teeth against very seasoned international players. So at the top, we'd love to see those players. It makes everybody better. But what I hope will happen is that we begin to use these ratings to get deeper down into the system to give more kids an opportunity to keep trying longer and not get either priced out of the system or discouraged out of the system. The other point that I was trying to make about the international nature of the game is that kids get better in college tennis if they're still keen on it. They get better because they're playing not only older, stronger, smarter people when they come in as freshmen and sophomores, but they're also playing people who come from different parts of the world, so that they see a wider diversity of opportunity, of play styles. So if we put kids, if we understand that tennis is international, by limiting our American kids from opportunities to play more styles that come from other countries, we're actually decreasing the quality of their development. And so the idea behind a universal rating system is, why limit a rating system to national boundaries or sectional boundaries? In the same way that illnesses don't pay any attention to national boundaries, we think that there should be one international rating system that, again, doesn't pay attention to national boundaries. It allows people to have an international passport, but they can go from the United States to France to Australia and find a great game. And that's really Dave Howell's original premise, is that we're losing people from a great game for lack of giving them a good game. And so at every level, I think that the idea of a universal approach is very timely and very useful. And, again, it gives the consumer much more choice about where to find good events. And that's probably something if you have time, we can talk about that.
For sure. Well, when I had Dave Howell on the show several months ago, there was a charge to open up an account at Universal Tennis, and y'all have since created a free account option, which I have been very grateful for, and I have publicized that news to Parenting Aces followers, because I think it's important to go on the site and play around a little bit and not have to make a $50 commitment in order to do so. So I applaud Universal Tennis for doing that and having that free option available. can you share with us a little bit about all of the features that are included in a free membership, and then maybe talk a little bit about why someone might want to take the plunge and go for a paid membership down the line?
Sure. No, I appreciate that. The premise from the beginning, as I looked at tennis and saw that it was largely getting to be an unaffordable sport for most economic strata, we wanted to create something that was universal but wouldn't limit anybody's ability to participate in it based on the size of their wallet. That was just a kind of a non-starter for us. And so it took a while to get there where Universal could provide that, but now we're very proud to say that Universal is going to be able to offer this feature as a forever free feature. And so people will be able to get on and look up the level of any player on college teams. The ratings in the basic free feature will show as integers. So you'll be able to view it as a 13 or a 14 or a 15. And if you look up a group of players, say in Atlanta, and you look up all the different levels, you'll see people, and they will be rated in descending order. So the highest 13s will be at the top, and the lower 13s will be at the bottom. And the advanced analytics, what allows Universal to keep providing this service, are basically two sets of tools. It gives you a finer drill into the level of the rating, so you would see a 13.41, for instance. But it gives you much easier search tools to identify players in certain areas, to build a tournament, to find a college by level, by conference, by division. At every level, there's simple tools, and basically for the cost of a half a tennis lesson or a full tennis lesson over the course of a year, you get all those advanced analytic tools. So what college coaches are all looking at now, they have some wonderful features. One thing we love, this idea is a virtual matchup, is that we're able to take any team now and match up the top 6 players according to their universal ratings, see what the differential is in the match, and then I'll probably end up taking a screenshot of that an hour before our match starts after we've exchanged lineups, and I'll tweet that out to a very large group of followers. So that's fun. You'll be able to go into a tournament. Any parent or coach could go into a tournament competitors list and say, well, how good a tournament is this? Will my son or daughter get the kind of competitive diet that will help them improve? And so you can go in and create a universal tennis rating list in order from top down, and to see how good this is. And if you can find yourself somewhere in the middle, you're probably going to get some great competition that weekend. We had one parent who used it to say, I'm not playing any national tournaments, I'm just going to futures. And so they used it to figure out that the futures in Mexico was a lot better competitively in the bandwidth for his son than the futures in Canada. So at every level, it begins to help the consumer themselves actually identify the level or the bandwidth of competition which will be optimal. If I can make one more point, is that Universal also wants to stress that they want everybody to look at the reliability of that rating, because if that reliability is not 100%, then Universal can't stand by its estimate of the person's competitiveness. So if you saw 10%, it simply means that that player doesn't have enough matches in the bank to have a reliable rating, because they haven't played enough against other players with a reliable rating.
Interesting. Well, if I could share just briefly how we have used Universal Tennis at our house during this recruiting process, maybe it would be helpful to some of the listeners. And please, Dave, feel free to jump in from the coaching side and add to what I'm saying. But my son found it very, very helpful. His recruiting process wound up coming down to a decision between 2 schools, that were, very similar in a lot of ways. And those who follow me on Facebook know I am a big TED Talk fan, and I actually posted not too long ago a talk that I listened to about making big decisions and how every decision doesn't always come down to a better choice, because sometimes the choices are equally good, and that's when your gut instincts come into play, I think. But that was my son's experience. It was coming down to two excellent choices, and he wasn't going to go wrong with either one. And so, how do you make this big decision in your life as an 18-year-old? And so Universal Tennis really helped him kind of come up with a reason to choose one school over the other. And it was really helpful for him to look at the current roster for each of the schools he was considering, plug in the players who had already committed to come in next year, and then look at his own rating to figure out where he would fall in the lineup and what his chances were to be a contributing member of the team in terms of actually getting to play during dual match season. And not only that, but then, as you said, to compare the schools with the other schools in the conference and figure out, which program has the better chance of winning the conference and hopefully going to the NCAA championships. And so there are all sorts of kind of factors that come into play. And, he found this really useful, as did I, looking at it with him. And it really gave us some concrete information to have a conversation about and, to help make that decision.
Well, I think that's wonderful, and I'm glad to hear that. That's an experience that a lot of parents have shared with me and junior players. You have to remember also from the coach's end, I might hear from 20 recruiting services a week and probably 50 players a week. So from the coach's point of view, to have someone send me, this is my universal rating number right in the subject line, I know right away, is this someone who has a legitimate chance to play in our lineup, or can I help tell that person where they might find a happier experience? And of course, if a person's a great academic star, I never want to discourage them from applying to Harvard, but I want to help them be realistic about finding the right fit for them tennis-wise. And so at every level, it helps us educate the juniors better. It helps us educate our own players better, and in general, it streamlines the process. And I really have believed for some time that we have a lot of transfers that go on in college tennis, and I think part of it is because kids haven't had a real way to find out what's the right fit competitively. So their coach says, well, if you dream high, you can accomplish anything you want, and so they go in and play way low on a team or may not make a team. They don't have a happy experience, so they transfer somewhere else. And I think that this begins to rationalize a process that is going on for thousands of kids every year. So like you, I think I'm delighted. It certainly makes my job easier. And having just returned from the ITA Coaches Convention, Universal had a booth, and we had coaches 3 deep waiting in line. Last year, they were saying, tell me more about it. This year, they're saying it's sensational. I use it all the time to do it. And so if that helps us get a better read on competitive level for kids, and it helps the kids get a better read, it's not that they should choose. You got to look into the coach and see, is he a developmental coach or what someone called a harvesting coach. You want to look at all those things, but this helps you with the initial filters. It's a little bit like the SATs. If someone knows, can I qualify for Harvard or should I be going somewhere else? And it's a great starting point, so I'm glad to hear it helped you and your son.
Well, and not only that, I didn't know about the feature where you could plug in a competitor list of a tournament. And it's so funny because I get emails and phone calls all the time from parents saying, gosh, there's got to be a way to look at these entry lists and determine whether or not my kid is going to get in the tournament or whether they're going to be seeded. And with USTA rankings, I mean, you can do that if you want to take the time and sit down and look up the ranking of every single kid that's signed up. But having that feature available on Universal Tennis is really cool, and I just discovered that yesterday, actually, and looked at the Winter Nationals competitor list on UTR, and, you know, it, like you said, it orders the players from top to bottom, and you can see where your player falls in the field, and as predicted, well, actually, I was actually kind of pleasantly surprised. My son falls smack dab in the middle of the field as it stands now for Winter Nationals, which to me means he's going to have a great experience there. You know, he's hopefully not going to get blown out of the water early on. He'll hopefully have some competitive matches along the way. But even if he gets, you know, a quote bad draw in the main draw, then we know there are going to be some players in the back draw that will also provide competitive matches for him, and so it makes it worth traveling to the tournament, and I'm expecting a really top-notch experience for him.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful, and we're using it in college similarly to seed and select for our fall tournaments, where we only have a weekend to play. We can now break down the top 16 UTR players, put them in an A flight, the next 16 in a B flight, or if we wanted to do a round robin, put 4 players in. At every level, it gives us an actual metric or a barcode. It just seems to streamline our experience. We did a search on Kalamazoo last year when they were trying to figure out USTA has 8 wild cards. We did a universal range for the qualifier before the wild cards were kicked in, and we found that the qualifier was going to be much stronger than the main draw at Kalamazoo. And without the wild cards, if they had to qualify based on points per round, we wouldn't be getting the right players into the main draw and the right players in the qualifier, which again would result in more lopsided matches. So at some level, I think everybody's coming to the conclusion that this tends to harmonize a lot of the things that haven't quite felt right now. So I think it's a fantastic tool, and I use it to keep track of recruits that I'm following. I can actually use it to do a timestamp. Eventually, Universal will automate that more, but in the meantime, I can do a copy and paste, get the Universal order of kids that I'm interested in, and hit it in a spreadsheet, date it, do it a month later, 2 months later, do the same thing, and I can actually begin to track the trajectory of progress for kids. And any parent or coach could be doing the same thing now. So it's really, it's the beauty of the tools, Lisa, as anybody knows in the tech industry, is that oftentimes someone will come up with a great idea, and then when you release those tools to people and they begin to exercise their own initiative, they often come up with uses for it that the creators never dreamed of. And that's the value of the Internet these days, is that these tools, people are writing us about new tools all the time. I had a coach say at the convention, you know, we all have questionnaires when people sign up, and I'm going to put a questionnaire that says, what's your UTR number? And I'm going to put a link so they know exactly where to sign up for a free subscription to it. If I could touch on another subject, if you have time, we've got these wonderful pool of kids, 345,000 kids by USTA estimates playing high school tennis. And probably only 10% of them are really active in age group play at the sectional or national level. And so the other kids really are not part of American tennis. They're part of their local conference or district. But imagine if all of those kids had a rating and they felt a part of the system, and that you could actually create level-based opportunities for them to play locally instead of going into an age-based system where they're automatically going to be put against one of the top 4 seeds and probably get shellacked and say, I'm going to go play ultimate frisbee. And so we've got this wonderful untapped but also untamed territory called high school tennis because it's run by 50 different sections, 50 different states. And so if we have a rational way to give kids credit for high school matches, which they would get through universal ratings, then all of those kids would come through the system and understand where they fit into more advanced play. We recruited a young man this year from St. Louis, and his rating was kind of lower than we would look at. And as we looked deeper, it turned out he was playing football 6 months of the year, and is a fantastic athlete, and will be a wonderful recruit for us. So at every level, we've got a system where the kids have to get on this, basically on this conveyor belt that runs year-round in order to get enough points to get into the summer tournaments. And eventually, I believe that we'll have a way for someone to use their rating to gain access to this, so that the kid who plays basketball or football or something and then gets going in the spring and gets good enough by the summer tournaments to be doing well, I think they deserve a chance to be in the nationals, and I think we encourage kids to be multi-sport athletes, which we know is better for them developmentally.
Right. Well, so this is a perfect segue to my next question, which is the New Balance tournament that was held on your campus this past summer. And entry to that tournament was based on UTR, and it was open to those kids who had played high school tennis during the previous school year. Were you on site during that tournament? How involved were you at that tournament?
I was very involved. I was there throughout the week. We were hosting at Harvard, and I was delighted to have the chance to host it because New Balance has been they're very committed to helping in the high school space, and they committed the money to do it. They worked with the USTA, and many of the kids reported it was the most fun national tournament that they'd ever played. And I'm sure it had nothing to do with the great equipment that New Balance gave out. It was all based on their universal experience. but they had a great time because they came in and they were playing at the level where they had a sense of mastery. And I think that if I could just, I'll get back to this, but if you think about a tournament, if the goal in having 64 kids in the same tournament is to find out who the best player is, then you just throw them together anyway because the best player will win. But if the goal is to make sure that the experience for all 64 of them is as optimal as possible, putting them together by levels initially, kids will still win and lose matches at the same rate, but the matches that they lose and they win will be far more competitive than the matches that they would play if they just get killed in the first round by a far better player. So I'm all about the efficiency of competition. I think that American kids are fantastic. I don't think they're getting as good a diet as the kids in other countries are, where your 18 through 22-year-old players are not playing college tennis. So it means that the 15, 16, 17-year-old players everywhere but in the United States are routinely playing with their older, stronger, smarter peers. That's got to have an effect. And I think that if we untie the hands of our developing American juniors by letting them play against more international players, by letting them play against college players, post-college players, a few more open tournaments where there's prize money to attract those better players, I think our kids are going to grow up and be competitively much more mature in a shorter time.
Interesting. I agree with you. I mean, it's just watching my own child this year kind of branch out and play men's open and play a few. It definitely plays a huge role in confidence building and dedication and commitment and all of that. So I'm in agreement.
Yeah, and the other thing, Lisa, that's almost debilitating about being successful in the 12 and under or the 14 and under is you get addicted to winning. And so generally, psychologically, you sort of stick with what worked for you. And we make a big deal. We say this is going to be the next Sampras or the next Federer. And so the kids get kind of stuck. They get afraid to try new things, whereas the kid in France they might come over and win the Orange Bowl, and that's a neat vacation for them, but they don't consider that playing in the Orange Bowl is a prerequisite for succeeding as a pro. They simply say, hey, that's a great vacation, let's go play it. As soon as they get back to France, they're entering the men's Opens tournaments where they will play better players at their level, and they're worried about improving their rating. So my big question for American tennis is, if France is producing 12 times more players per capita and only ranking 60 men and 30 women, and everybody else is rated, do we have to remain attached to this ranking paradigm that tends to create a sense, if I lose to someone below me, I failed. If I beat someone above me, even though they're only above me because they got more points, because they found more events, and they could afford to travel more, then I somehow got a great win. Well, I'd rather give kids a real litmus test for their competitiveness. To say, if you lose to someone who's in 1.0 within your bandwidth, even if they're lower down, the odds are you're going to have a competitive match with them. If you lose to them, it's not the end of the world. And I think that's a much healthier way for students, for juniors, to think about their development. I hate to see a kid lose 7-5 in the third set and say, I failed. And in the universal system, they haven't failed. In fact, if they play a player with a higher rating and they lose 7-5 in the third, they're actually rewarded for doing that well. So I know it works better psychologically, and it makes kids understand if they're down a set and they're down 2-0, instead of just letting it go, saying this person's better than me. Every time they fight for that extra game, they're improving their rating.
Interesting, and I think that's a great message to propagate. I mean, nothing drives me nuttier than watching a junior tennis match and seeing one of the players, quote, tank the match. And those of us who've been at junior tournaments, we've all seen that happen. And there's no penalty for it. If they feel like they're going to lose, it doesn't matter if they lose 6-6 or they lose 0-0. A loss is a loss, and it affects their ranking the same way. What you're saying is, with universal tennis ratings, the more games you win in a set or in a match, the more you're rewarded for that match. And so there is always incentive to keep fighting till the very last point. And I think that, that message is crucial to get out there and will help our kids be more competitive in the long run, not just on the tennis court, but in the world in general.
Anywhere. If we go from a pass-fail system, right now, if you win, our rankings and other rating systems reward yes, you won or yes, you lost. And if that's a pass-fail system, so you could get a 79 in a course, and the passing grade is 80, and you will have failed, no matter how much you learned. And that's a bad message for kids. We want them to know that if you just keep trying, all the great upsets in any sport come from just clawing away. Try to get 1 point at a time. Try to get another point. Maybe you get a game, and all of a sudden you change your opponent's mentality. So at every level, this is healthier psychologically for kids to be invested in a system of reward that measures what's important.
So how do you counter the statement that our American kids aren't winning because they're too soft?
Well, I kind of look at, there are some big societal forces that are going on. Obesity is a big issue, but it's becoming a big issue in other countries. What I like to do is I like to spend time identifying the problems over which I have some control. I can't control how many kids are on their iPods or their iPads. What we can control is how good an experience we give kids and how accessible we make the experience. And so we can sit and complain what they aren't, but until we've given them a chance to connect with the very healthiest competitive diet possible at the lowest possible costs to families, both financially and educationally, until we've done that, it's pretty hard to sit back and criticize them for being too soft. And so I basically look and say, well, we can invest millions of dollars in our top players, but even the NFL finds out that it can't figure out which quarterback's going to be successful when the kids are age 22. So how on earth are we going to figure out which ones are going to be successful at age 12 or 13 or 14? And so I think that you make bets on bigger numbers of kids, and if we can create local ecosystems of development in cities all over the country and use the colleges almost as epicenters of competition. You've got these fabulous facilities all over the country. If we can connect those two pieces, now our junior players have that healthier organic diet of competition at less cost. That's got to produce thousands more kids, because thousands more kids will have a great experience playing tennis.
True. Very true. Well, I take issue when people say American kids are soft and that's our big problem here, because I'm out there, a lot of weekends and a lot of days watching these kids, and yes, there are some that are soft, but for the most part, the kids that are out there are fighting tooth and nail to win these matches and working very, very hard to improve as players and reach their goals, whatever those may be. So I think there are a lot of factors at play. It was interesting. USTA hosted a webinar last night on their Team USA concept, which is, USTA is making a very, very concerted effort to work more closely with local coaches, personal coaches, and parents in developing this next generation of American players, and I applaud them for that. I think it's a great initiative. But, it's still, tennis is one of those sports that it requires individual commitment, and yet at the same time it requires a team of people around the player to help the player achieve. So it's very complicated, and I think anything that we can do to provide incentive for these kids to continue working hard is a good thing. And to me, the universal tennis system of rating players provides that necessary incentive.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that having people have an independent and neutral system outside of any one competitive structure, I think it helps to reform the inefficiencies in any of these structures. It simply gives, there's more accountability to it. Universal's always said, look, just use Universal as a carpenter's plumb line. Just hang it beside whatever ranking system you say and see if it makes it better. We're using it in college tennis to seed tournaments better. USTA Midwest, USTA NorCal, they're using it to seed tournaments better. They're starting to use it to select players better. That's got to be good for the system, And this conversation 5 years ago didn't even exist. And so I think Universal's offering has really begun to change the narrative to push us all in a direction where we're able to give kids a healthier experience. That has to be good for American tennis as a whole. And we're finding that organizations at every level, whether it's, I spoke with before 500 high school coaches in Texas 2 weekends ago, and they love the idea of actually feeling that their kids are citizens in American tennis rather than feeling they're off in the boondocks somewhere. And so at every level it begins to tie what has become a very fragmented world of tennis. It begins to tie those loose ends back together into a real fabric of tennis. So I applaud the USTA for taking this Team USA approach because as the politician Tip O'Neill once said that all politics is local. Well, at some level, all player development is local, whether you're calling Nick Bollettieri's academy local because he had all these great players in one place, or whether you're called St. Louis back in the 1960s where they churned out 20 or 30 international level players just out of that city and region alone, or whether you call any college team local development where they put kids together from all over the world and watch them get better. So I applaud everybody's effort. Nobody sets out to mess things up. There's so many good people working to do this, and so I kind of joke with my peers when they sit around complaining, and I say, if you could bottle up all the hot air that we waste complaining about things, and you could light a city. And so that's what I tried to do, is say, look, if I can help push this initiative forward, American tennis benefits, everybody benefits, and we build a better future for everybody. So we love it, and we've seen people come out of the woodworks to help. The early adopters, people got in and cut and pasted results from tournaments and submitted it, and now we're watching it spread to other countries who are writing and saying, how do we participate in this? And so it's a grassroots movement that has legs, and it's every week seems to come with a new opportunity. So I certainly appreciate your even taking the time to do this. I think that this is the way we all make American tennis better. We all want the same thing, and we get frustrated with it. But kind of let's keep moving forward with this. And how simple it is if on your show you tell people, look, it's free, go for it. Well, how long does it take before everybody's speaking that language? And the parents that want a little extra help in the college church and understanding development better, boy, if you don't have to spend $100 on a flight change at a national tournament, and you can spend that to have all these different ways to look at your son or daughter's development competitively, well, I think that's money well spent. And then I think that down the road, we're looking at high school coaches putting on level-based play for kids at that level. We're going to keep so many more kids in the game rather than this leaky bucket that we have now. And the last comment that I would make, Lisa, is that I listened to Billie Jean King a year or so ago speak at the USTA semi-annual meeting in New York, and she said, we have to have a delivery system that's easy as 1, 2, 3. And Universal's whole design from the beginning was local. It started local in saying, let's make a kid that can get a serve in half the time they try. They can hit a forehand in, maybe a backhand in, and they can keep score. Let's make that kid a level 1. And so the beauty of it is it's such an easy entry-level process that people all over the country could be doing it. And at a certain level, it really takes away the need for all these different artificial levels and forcing kids to stay in an age group for a long time until they've played 10 tournaments. All of those things are well-intended but crude approximations of the value of simple level-based play.
True. And I think it's important to note as well, Dave, that Universal Tennis isn't looking to replace the other ratings and rankings that are out there, but
not at all.
It's looking to complement and supplement these other forms of leveling players, and just to provide additional information that can be used by tournament directors, by coaches, by parents, by players themselves to make tennis better all around.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful point, Lisa. The Universal's never been trying to replace something. They've been trying to add to. And if it helps to rationalize a system, very quickly, I'll show you the winner of the New Balance high school event last summer was a fellow named Matt Kuhar, a wonderful player out of Providence, Rhode Island. He earned a wild card into an ITF event. And if the ITF event had been seeded based on universal tennis ratings, he would have been seeded in the top 16. He, of course, had no ITF points because he never played ITF events. But sure enough, he fulfilled his universal seed. He won 2 rounds, got into the round of 16, and so the system worked better that way. And at every level, I think people are seeing, well, if we Midwest, for instance, seeded, they used the points per round a year ago for their summer championships. It had all their best players in. It was a tremendous tournament talent-wise. But 2 of the top 3 players in the tournament were seeded 12 and 17 based on their points per round because they'd been playing other events. And so now Midwest is looking forward to using them because it'll get the better players in the right places sooner. So to that degree, it helps. And it doesn't have to replace anything. It just helps.
Right. Well, I also want to encourage, again, everybody listening to today's show to go to universaltennis.com, sign up for a free account, look up your child, see where they are, and if your child is in high school and either just starting or in the midst of college recruiting, take a look at the ratings for the various schools that your child is interested in playing for, because it really does give you a very clear picture of what's an appropriate school to look at, what's a reach school, which is a no-brainer school, and I just found it incredibly useful to take a look at that data and, you know, use it in the conversations that we were having around the various schools that my son was looking at. And if you want to bite the bullet and invest in the higher level membership, the more in-depth membership, I will tell you that also is very, very worthwhile. Even if you only use it to take a look at entry lists for the tournaments that your child is considering playing in to determine whether or not they're going to get into the tournament, be seeded in the tournament, have a shot at winning the tournament. I was very pleasantly surprised by that feature. I didn't know it existed, and finding it very useful.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting, Lisa. Dave Howell, who's the creator of Universal, along with some other people down in Virginia, what intrigued me about him is he just looked at tennis and competition through a different lens than I had ever heard. And so he said, look, we got to make it possible for everybody to just build a list like that. And the beauty of it is as more people adopt this, it's going to get much more automated, much easier to use. But right now, the fact that these tools are available for the college coaches and the parents and the junior coach to figure out how to facilitate better competition, that's got to be good for us all.
Absolutely. Dave, thank you so much for joining us today and taking time out. I know this is a crazy busy time of year as your semester's winding down and you're just getting back into town after being down in Florida. So thank you. I value this conversation so much because, like I said, I'm kind of a recent convert and discovering new uses each day, and I'll probably be calling you or emailing you to pick your brain a little more as I get more familiar with the whole system. But best of luck to your team this year, too.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate all your efforts to make tennis better, and I thank your listeners. I hope everybody does give it a try, because everybody, if you can have what I had, that kind of aha moment, like, wow, where did this come from? So I thank you for your efforts and for the time with you this morning, and I wish everybody a happy holiday, and take care.
Same to you. Thanks so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
To my listeners, thank you for tuning in today. I am still searching for a guest for next week's show, so please stay tuned to ParentingAces.com for an update. And in the meantime, I hope your holiday shopping is going well. For those who celebrate, happy Hanukkah. Tonight's the first night, so enjoy that celebration with your friends and family. And I will see you next week on Parenting Aces.